in danger. So Lord Lama has the details for us.
The war on Tigray has had a devastating impact on the community as it has been characterized by its destructive nature. Many health centers have been destroyed or looted by the Allied forces during their occupation, leaving millions without any medical care. The 8-month-long siege that followed has made it difficult for the health system to revive and support those in need. In his interview with our station, Dr. Hagos Godefai, head for Tigray's Bureau of Health, said that the medical supplies that have reached Mekelle are less than 7% of the required amount, and called it a drop in the ocean. He also added that the supply ICRC and other concerned bodies are bringing through their flights to Mekelle is very small in relation to the amount of the medical supplies needed in Tigray.
I can say in regard to the drugs like reaching Mekelle currently, it's a drop in an ocean. Yet we have received only less than 7%. While we are demanding a lot. Yes, I'm telling you, by the way, about the 2 months minimum stock period only, by the way. So 93% still we're looking forward to get the support. In the first place, people are like counting the number of flights. In every flight, especially when we are like, when IRC was like starting to lift the medical equipments, by the way, in every flight they were carrying only 1 metric ton. In 15 flights, they brought 15.8 metric ton. In fact, these days they're using cargo, but still the cargo they are using is very small, by the way. So we have plenty of patients under follow-up. More than 100,000 patients under chronic follow-up, like for non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, kidney, cardiac patients, and then the like. We have more than 43,000 HIV patients. Can you imagine? Still, we didn't get any drug for HIV patients. We are using the lucky health facilities are using expired drugs to treat their patients, the HIV patients.
Dr. Hagos also added that it has become impossible to dispatch the medical supplies into the other towns and rural areas of Tigray due to lack of fuel, which in turn is induced by the siege.
Mekelle is like serving as a warehouse. Yes, it's reaching. The 6% drugs are reaching Mekelle, I know. Everybody knows. But because of the fuel shortage, we didn't dispatch those drugs to the health facilities. So still, people in the countryside, people in the other towns, they are not like getting even the drugs because of the transportation.
He also mentioned that the most vulnerable members of the community, such as children and mothers, are highly affected by the siege.
The main vulnerable groups, I can say, are children and mothers. If there is no drug, if there is no food, those who are highly affected are, the mothers and the children. So every woman has the right to get family planning service. She has a right to get delivery service, antenatal care service, and the like. Because the mothers are like denied, many mothers are dying because of bleeding.
He added that the Ethiopian government is far from being supportive, even though the international community keeps trying.
They are trying their best to help us in this regard. But from the Addis Ababa, from the government side, still the problem is as it is, by the way. They're not supporting. They don't want to send drugs. They want to distract the people. They want to perish the people. This is a continuation of the genocide. So they are joking on it, by the way.
Lastly, Dr. Hagos called on the international community to take a decisive action before the people of Tigray perish.
The international community should act immediately for peace resolution and also address the basic life-saving humanitarian aids. Otherwise, many people, will perish. So please help us in this regard. Otherwise, the tragedy is coming, by the way.
According to UN OCHA, no humanitarian supplies have been delivered to Tigray by road since mid-December last year, and no humanitarian workers have been cleared to travel from Samara to Mekelle since October 28, 2021.
An ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray, gross violations of human rights and lack of access to medical care and other essential services has displaced over 2 million Tigrayans since the conflict erupted in November 2020. Our reporter Winter Kirana looks at the living conditions of women sheltered in IDP camps across Tigray who find their situation exasperated by lack of basics such as food and medical supplies. Let's take a look.
The war in Tigray is one of the most violent conflicts in recent memory. For over 60 months, civilians have been killed, their properties looted and destroyed, as Ethiopian and Eritrean forces worked to obstruct badly needed aid. Over 2.2 million people were displaced since the start of the conflict in 2020, 1 million of which were displaced as a result of an ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray. And according to UN estimates, over 1 million of those displaced are women and girls.
We came
here when the shelling started. Our house was destroyed, and my son was hurt. He lost his eye during the shellings. A shrapnel hit him in the eye. He had stitches for 3 months and needed treatment for 10. I have other kids too who I couldn't bring here. I even left an infant behind. I haven't seen them for 4 months. I fled with 2 of my children. My firstborn was killed in Dadabit. Eritrean soldiers shot her dead while we were on the road. After I reached Abiy Adi, I was raped and became pregnant. So I had an abortion, but I still grieve for my daughter. I resent that I was not able to bury her properly.
The 60 months long communications blackout in Tigray, as well as a systematic destruction of health facilities across the state, has meant that neither government nor aid agencies are able to grasp the magnitude of the violence on women in Tigray. But former Ethiopian Minister for Women and Children's Affairs, Filsan Abdi, says an investigation by her ministry into reports of widespread sexual violence in Tigray were gruesome.
Beyond the horrific and brutal acts of sexual violence, the women and girls of Tigray suffered. There was something systematic about the rapes. It felt premeditated. And the complicit silence that followed and the attempt to thwart investigations and block the resulting report was damning. I quickly became at odds with the Prime Minister's office and the Prosperity Party leadership after the reports. Of course, I tried to work with the system to help Tigray women and girls. But any request for assistance and funds on our emergency action plan to gender-based violence and child protection for Tigray was ignored by the Ministry of Finance and all other relevant stakeholders, agencies.
Mebrahton Fatoui, a human rights expert, rape has not only been used as a weapon of war, but says there is sufficient reason to believe that sexual violence was being used as a tool to commit genocide against the people of Tigray.
The rape is committed, for example, publicly, then it can be said that the one who is committing that rape has a confidence on certain system, on certain organization. So if it is public, for example, we can say that it is systematic. If it has similar pattern, then it might indicate that there is certain systemic way of doing it for certain purpose. If it is also, if you take, for example, gang rape, usually when a rape is made by more than one, there is high probability of, it is possible that it can be established in the court of law or in anyone. So unless they have a confidence on a certain system, on a certain organization, it's less probable that gang rape will not be committed. So Gang rape can also be one indicator of systematic kind of rape.
But this excruciating violence on women in Tigray is just one of the many layers of violence faced by IDP women. According to research, displacement added on the top of pre-existing power inequalities makes women refugees or IDPs more vulnerable to sexual assault. Refugee or IDP women generally have less influence than host communities, creating conditions that can easily lead to sexual exploitation and abuse. According to rapid gender analysis, male members of the host community, male IDPs, and male refugees have sexually exploited women and girls within and between these groups. The ongoing siege on Tigray that has discontinued all basic services and obstructed the delivery of much-needed food aid adds to the risk of sexual exploitation and abuse. There are increasing reports that displaced women are exchanging sex for food from host communities. In addition to the practice of exchanging sex for food, the total blockade has forced displaced women and girls to exchange sex for small amount of cash. Adding salt to the injury, the lack of adequate shelter in Tigray is worsening the crisis created by the extreme lack of food. Large numbers of IDPs are sleeping in an open air or in adequate shelters. There are no sex-segregated sleeping facilities or latrines, leaving displaced women and girls vulnerable to gender-based sexual violence.
The wheats are given with fingerprint, and they are past their expiration date. And as for this blanket, some people donated it to me. We are not receiving aid. We are starving. So I call on the international community to help us with blankets, pajamas, and food. Look at it. We only have one.
Less than 10% of health centers in Tigray are functional, while almost none of the IDP camps provide health services. As of March 2021, only one facility provides comprehensive clinical management for rape in Tigray. Contraception is only available in less than half of the functioning health centers. Mental health care is in an especially critical need. According to Mental Health and Psychological Support Services Officer, many Tigrayans have experienced severe trauma and mental health care is desperately needed, yet it is rarely available. Displaced Tigrayans do not have enough food, shelter, medical care, hygiene kits, or water, and the consequences of this are worst among women. Access to health care, especially sexual and reproductive health services, is limited, and shelter is inadequate at best and unsafe at worst, putting most women IDPs who have almost no access to livelihoods and often live in an insecure environment in a desperate situation.
There are currently over 2.2 million internally displaced across Tigray, with over 1 million of them displaced from western Tigray by Amhara forces and allies from Eritrea. Internally displaced children from western Tigray that have been sheltered in Magala, Zakhra Samatat primary schools say lack of food and other basic supplies have exasperated an already dire humanitarian situation. Haile Gebru has more.
Over 2 million people from Tigray have been displaced from their homes due to the crisis in Tigray so far. The people you see here are living in famine and without the necessary needs to survive. People from western Tigray were displaced since the beginning of the war and have continued to be displaced. Children displaced from western Tigray and recently sheltered in Zakhra Samatat IDP center at Magala are in dire situation because of the ongoing siege. They are in need of an immediate healthcare and humanitarian assistance.
The Amhara militia and Fano vigilante group have been committing unspeakable atrocities on us. They forced us to leave our sweet homes in a barbaric manner. We were being beaten and intimidated day in, day out. They were routinely saying to us that you are the children of junta. Finally, we have been expelled to here.
We have been undervalued by the Amhara forces since November 4, 2020. We were being ordered to leave our homes as if we were living in their land. They told us that, leave our land because you are Getachos and Debretzion's children, not Amhara. They have also savagely killed my father on November 4, 2020, while we were in exile. Moreover, we have also been denied not to bury the corpse for days. We were simply watching it.
The Amhara forces have massacred thousands of innocent Tigrayans, including children. Those enemies are extremely cruel. They pull out children from the back of their mothers. We have reached here after such a long and tiresome journey.
The situation continued to get harder and harder due to the siege. Food and medical supplies have been completely depleted, leaving the IDPs in a dire humanitarian assistance. Internally displaced children who have sheltered at the Samatat IDP center say that they are suffering from severe hunger and disease.
We are starved to death. There are several people in our room who got sick. We have also 3 children who need food and medical assistance now. We couldn't receive any aid so far.
We have no food, clothes, medical supplies, or even shelter. We are in distress, and the world should give attention to our plight. Residents of Maqala city had been trying to help us. However, this time around they themselves need to be helped, as they too are severely affected due to the siege.
The IDP stated that they are in a critical condition and that it could even get worse unless they get immediate life-saving humanitarian assistance. Apparently, they called out on the international community to provide them with the help that they need badly.
Even before the start of the conflict in November of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic had forced students in Tigray to discontinue their education. Now, well over 2 years late, fear of airstrikes, hunger, and the deliberate and systematic destruction of schools by invading Ethiopian and Eritrean forces has meant that students in Tigray are not able to proceed with their education. The head for Tigray Bureau of Education released its report on the level of destruction on Tigray's educational facilities. The Bureau head says Tigray's primary education system has regressed to its pre-1990s state. Our reporter Abel Zagabo looks at exactly what this means and its implications. Let's take a look.
Failure by consecutive governments to improve access to basics such as healthcare, education, and failure to expand infrastructures was just one of the many burning issues at the start of Tigray's resistance against the military junta in 1970s. Until the mid-1990s, Tigray had a population of about 4 million people, but had only 4 high schools and no universities. The determination of the political elite at the time to improve education is no more illustrated than in the fact that even in the midst of the bitter resistance with the military junta, Tigray People's Liberation Front, the political party leading Tigray's resistance, would manage to open 58 primary schools, train nearly 700 instructors, and get close to 20,000 students through primary schools. Above all, the education system established during the resistance had established Tigrinya as a language of instruction, giving the people of Tigray a sense of pride to learn and write in their own language. TPLF and EPRDF's contribution towards the education sector in Ethiopia was remarkable, a country that had one of the poorest education systems in the world due to armed conflict, famine, and humanitarian crisis was transformed. Enrollment of children at school age reached about 95% coverage. The expansion of secondary and tertiary level education was massive. A country with an intake capacity of few thousands in 1991 expanded to over 400,000 in the year 2014. The access of ordinary Tigrayans had also shown exponential growth before the start of the conflict in November 2020. Tigray had 2,221 primary schools and 271 secondary schools, with close to 1.5 million pupils, with almost exactly half being women. In May of 2021, Human Rights Watch would issue the first report focused primarily on bringing to light the level of damage on Tigray's education system. It also has to be noted that the destruction of the educational infrastructure in Tigray had not only resulted in monetary crisis in Tigray but also deprived millions of children the right to education. The report would find that education facilities across the state were deliberately and systematically destroyed by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, their equipments looted and infrastructure damaged. A shocking report by Tigray Education Bureau reveals Tigray has lost over 200 teachers and close to 2,000 students since the start of the conflict in November of 2020.
1,911 students, 235 teachers and other staff members, including the academic leadership. Totally, 2,146 members of the educational society lost their lives during the aggression period, out of which 1,798 are female and 348 are male.
The head for the Bureau of Education, Shisha Amaris, says that the average walking distance to access primary schools has declined to its status in 1992, which was 7.3 kilometers, but the distance to access secondary schools has reached a whopping 17 kilometers.
As an indicator, if we take a radius of walking distance to schools, home to school distance, average home to school distance of accessing primary schools, in 2020 it was 2.5 kilometers. Excluding Western Zone. Current status of this indicator is 7.3 kilometers. That means we have got declined back to 1992. This was the status in 1992. Working radius to access secondary schools, we had 7 kilometers radius in 2022. Now it reached 17 kilometers.
The head for the Bureau says he believes there were more sinister intentions behind invading forces' systematic destruction of schools in Tigray.
Among their genocidal targets, education and educational infrastructure were the top focuses of these invading and fascist forces. They also targeted human and historical educational capacities of Tigray. They are well aware of damaging education as best instrument to eliminate people in both short and long term.
The deliberate destruction of educational facilities in Tigray is just one of the many appalling features of the ongoing conflict, while the world continues to watch idly by as the people lose over 40 years of intensive investment into their future.
انتظرونا قريبا على قناة تلفزيون تيغراي باللغة العربية.
وهنا سنطرح تاريخ وحضارة وأيضا صوت شعب تيغراي من شرقها إلى غربها ومن شمالها إلى جنوبها.
من هي تيغراي؟
تيغراي أرض الحبشة ومنبع تاريخ أفريقيا. وتيغراي بوابة أو مدخل الديانة المسيحية والإسلامية في أفريقيا. ولا ننسى بأن تيغراي هي من استضافة الصحابة في عهد الملك النجاشي. تيغراي غنية بتاريخها وحضاراتها العريقة، فكانت مملكة أكسوم فيما مضى من أعظم الممالك في العالم.
ومن هو شعب تيغراي؟
فأما شعب تيغراي شعب مثقف ومتدين، والذي واجه ويمر بالكثير من التحديات ولا يزال صامدا رغم كل الصعوبات.
وماذا تريد تيغراي؟
تيغراي تريد السلام والمحبة والأخوة، لا أكثر ولا أقل.
إذن كل هذا وأكثر في برنامجنا الذي سيحتوي على أخبار حصرية، تاريخية، سياسية واقتصادية،
وأيضا لقاءات ووثائقيات هنا في قناة تيغراي باللغة العربية.
من الشعب وإلى الشعب.
وتابعونا على التردد التالي: القمر الصناعي ياهسات 52.5 درجة شرق، تردد 11.843، الاستقطاب تلقائي، معدل الرمز 27500.
Our reporter has visited the district of Europe in northeastern Tigray, where the blockade on food and other essential items by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces has devastated residents. There are over 6.5 million people in Tigray in dire need of humanitarian assistance, as the Ethiopian government has continued its chokehold on basic supplies coming into the region. Fanny Olimru has the details.
The 8 months-long occupation of Tigray by allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces were characterized by several massacres, looting, and deliberate destruction of civilian infrastructures. In addition to this, an 8 months-long blockade on food supplies and other essential items has worsened the humanitarian catastrophe. The district of Irob is found in northeastern Tigray. The district has been one of the most affected. The presence of Eritrean forces in November of 2020 was followed by incessant and deliberate destruction on public and private property in the district. The 8 months-long siege on Tigray that has blocked the entry of aid has worsened the crisis, leaving many at the brink.
People used to lend each other goods to help one another survive, but that's not possible anymore. Many have reached the brink. The situation is horrific.
But it's not just lack of food items that is devastating the residents, but also lack of medical supplies. According to the residents, lack of medication has devastated those with chronic illnesses.
Family leaders, women, people with chronic diseases like HIV/AIDS, depression, children are dying due to hunger and lack of medication.
The residents also called on the international community for help and to act decisively to end the ongoing siege.
We are speaking up on behalf of the people of Europe. We are starving. We need help.
We need humanitarian aid urgently. People are starving.
And finally, a report by U.S. Department of Agriculture has found that the inflation rate of food items in Ethiopia has reached a whopping 42%. A report from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on late Thursday said that Ethiopian inflation of food items has reached 41.9%, according to the report. The major factors that are driving food inflations are spikes in the price of cooking oils and fats, bread and cereals, and dairy and meat products. For more, Aragawi Gabramkaya.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture announced on Thursday that inflation rate for food items in Ethiopia has reached a whopping 42%. According to the report, the major factors that are driving food inflation are spikes in price of essential items such as bread and cereal, cooking oil and dairy, and meat products. The report indicated increased government spendings due to the armed conflict, limitation in agricultural production, and increase in fuel prices were contributing to the rising food inflation level. Over 6.5 million people in Tigray alone are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance, according to the Office of Emergency Response in the region, while more than 6.8 people in 4 other regions, including Oromia and Somalia, will be in need of urgent assistance by mid-March. This came out just days after the Ethiopian government approved an additional budget of 2.4 billion, which over 74% has been allocated to military expenditure. For over 2 decades, Ethiopia has been showing promising economic progress, recording double-digit for well over a decade. In October 2021, however, IMF withheld its prediction on Ethiopia's economic growth on its annual World Economic Outlook, stating the country's volatile circumstance. This has put Ethiopia alongside countries such as Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. The ongoing conflict